going to walk in front of you. Welcome, everyone. I'm Lynn Marsden Atlas, Executive Director of the Arthur Ross Gallery, and I'm delighted to have you with us this evening. We're very excited to celebrate this exhibition, God Complex, Different Philadelphia, guest curated by Roberto Lugo. And this evening, we're going to have a conversation with Roberto and Jennifer Zwilling. They're both, standing behind me or sitting behind me. And they're going to have a conversation about Roberto's work and this particular exhibition. Jennifer Zwilling joined the Clay Studio as curator of artistic programs in January of 2015. She administers the gallery, shop, artist resident program, guest artist program, and the Clay Studio collection. An active member of the craft world in Philadelphia and beyond, Zwilling has forged relationships across museums, academia, and media boundaries. She's a member of the Board of Overseers of Craft Now, Philadelphia. And before coming to the Clay Studio, she was at the Philadelphia Museum of Art for 14 years, where she was most recently project assistant curator for American Decorative Arts and Contemporary Craft. Jennifer taught the history of modern craft for 10 years at the Tyler School of Art, as well as art history at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. She holds a BA in history from Ursinus College and an MA in art history from Temple University, Tyler School of Art. Roberto Lugo is a Philadelphia-based artist, ceramicist, social activist, spoken word poet, and educator. Lugo utilizes classical pottery forms in conjunction with portraiture and surface design reminiscent of his North Philadelphia upbringing and hip hop culture to highlight themes of poverty, inequality, and racial injustice. Roberto Lugo's works are multicultural mashups, traditional European and Asian ceramic techniques reimagined with a 21st century street sensibility. Awarded a 2019 Pew Fellowship and a 2019 Rome Prize, Lugo's work resides in the permanent collections of the Brooklyn Museum, Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and the High Museum, among many others. The artist's work is currently on view here at the Arthur Ross Gallery in God Complex, Different Philadelphias, and soon to be on view at the Metropolitan Museum in November. Support for God Complex Different Philadelphia has been provided by the Sachs Program for Arts Innovation. And now it's my great pleasure to welcome Jen Zwilling and Roberto Lugo.
Live studio audience. It's exciting.
We do have a live studio audience. Thank you so much, Lynn. That was a nice introduction. And thank you for having us. I'm excited to be here with Roberto. As always, it's an honor and a privilege and fun.
Yeah. Don't you feel like I kind of feel like our relationship is I don't know, getting to be iconic. We're like you're like the Philadelphia art curator, and I'm like ceramics curator, ceramics, and I'm like a potter from here, and like, you know, people kind of like a tag team at this point.
I will take it. I would love to be a tag team. I don't know, somebody could put us on two sides of the pot someday, maybe.
Maybe. I know a guy.
Great. Well, honestly, it's just always a pleasure. I was trying to think of when we met. I don't really remember. I feel like you said, since I came to the Clay Studio, you've been, you almost were back in Philly, and it does feel like we're kind of a nice team. So thanks for saying that.
Yes, and well, what's interesting too is I think one of the first things I think that you recognized about me was the importance of me being from Philadelphia in the context of ceramics, and you working with an institution of ceramics in Philadelphia, even when I didn't live here. So I got invited as a visiting artist, which really fulfilled a dream of mine that I hadn't been able to accomplish, which was being an artist in residence at the Clay Studio. And, you know, that's sort of a commitment and a big opportunity. And so I got and I still have like so many great memories of living in the old city for a summer and making pots. So yeah, good times.
I do strongly remember that you told me that I think you said it was the first time you threw a pot in Philadelphia
Yep.
at the Clay Studio,
At the Clay Studio was the first place I threw a pot. First time I threw a pot in Philadelphia. Yep.
which is amazing.
Thanks.
So I really want to talk about how you got into pottery, but normally when we do a lunch and learn, so this is like dinner and learn, I guess, for the Clay Studio, I ask the same question at the very beginning, but I'm going to save it for the end.
Okay.
Because I want to talk about this amazing space that we're in right now
Yeah.
first, and then we'll sort of like do one of those little rewind things and end up at the beginning. I'm going to read everyone a couple of sentences from Roberto's artist curator statement. So see, now we're on the same side of the pot now, I guess.
I learned from the best.
I better watch out. You're going to take my job, I think. Okay. So when you walk into the gallery, there's this wonderful statement on the wall, and the first bit and the last bit. So much of my life has felt like I don't matter. As someone who didn't have access to art growing up and discovering that passion later in life, I would find myself walking into museums where none of the art reflected people who looked like me, the hierarchy of whiteness and the patriarchy echoing through the halls. I imagine how much the world could change for a child who walks through the doors of a museum and sees a portrait of someone who looks like them on a piece of pottery. Representation is establishing what can be possible and then demonstrating how beautiful diversity is. And I just wanted everyone at home to make sure that they got the power of those words. I hope everyone gets to come and visit. The other thing is that underneath, on that title wall, you have the English version and the Spanish version.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what it was like to think about writing that statement, or actually we should probably back up and ask, how did this come about? How did this mission get started?
It came about with me talking with Lynn Dolby. Where's Lynn? Back there somewhere.
She's back there. Hi, Lynn Smith, Dolby.
And one of the things that I kind of felt with this idea of when you mentioned that I had thrown my first pot in Philadelphia, I think that was in maybe 2015, around then. And as a professor at Tyler School of Art, I actually have students who've been working in art longer than I have. And there's a lot of moments where I'm like, how do I teach them? Like in many cases, I know less than them. And then there's moments where I know more, and that's true for being a professor in general. And so it's a really humbling experience. And, to have this conversation and move to Philly, I got a job working at Tyler School of Art, the position I hold now. And I really wanted to figure out how to connect with Philadelphia and the art community here, because I lived still most of my life in Philadelphia, and I didn't do anything really art related when I was here. I mean, the art that I did is the sort of art that you see on the walls, the graffiti, but I didn't really see it as art. So it is, a social thing. It was a social thing. It was more about me hanging out with my cousins. And I think a lot of art that comes from communities like mine, I think sometimes we intermingle the idea of poverty and race, but those are two different things. They're often intersected, but they're two different things. And so when people don't have art classes, sometimes they paint on the walls outside. When they don't have music classes, sometimes they drum on the lunch tables and rap, and every culture has its own version of that. And so I really wanted to be able to connect with Philadelphia. And I thought, what an incredible opportunity to be able to work with, this institution, because it's something that, like, a place where everybody in the country knows of. I mean, this is a preeminent institution for education.
Yeah.
And to be invited to have work of mine and or at least have my mind or my, all this stuff, this opportunity to do something here in this art space meant that my voice had gotten to the point where it mattered. Like, I grew up here, and now I'm getting invited by an Ivy League institution to be able to curate a show here. it meant a lot, you know, and there are certain things that you do because they're good for your career, certain things that you do, you know, because you have to make a living, some things you do for the culture, you know. I think this is a good combination of a lot of those things. But I really think that the significance of this exhibition was the cultural significance, because there's a mashup happening here. I mean, there's a reality of the collection, which is kind of brings me to how I thought about this, this project. Because when I started to look at the collection, two things struck me. First, there's so many incredibly historically relevant and just incredible pieces that exist here. But then also there's the paradox of like me also loving those things, but not seeing myself reflected in them. And, you know, kind of feeling like left out in a way, you know. But then at the same time, the folks who work here gave me an opportunity to change that. And so I really felt like this is an opportunity for someone to like me to walk the walk, you know. And there's so many opportunities for us to criticize and complain, but there's just as many opportunities for us to actually be able to do something about it. And for me, this exhibition is my attempt to do that.
And it's stunning when you walk in. I mean, people can see a little bit behind us what's happening, but again, you have to come see it in person. I feel like you said the word mashup, and I was thinking about the title, God Complex, Different Philadelphia. And I feel like those two phrases are a mashup in a way, because each one of them is so powerful on its own. And then when you put them together, they can mean something even totally different. So what were you thinking about? God Complex is a pretty bold title. What does that mean to you?
Well, it actually came out of the dialogue of us talking about the exhibition. And, you know, I think like one of the things that was hard was normally when you're curating, and you're a curator, and I'm really just a guest at this, or this is something new to me, is, you know, sometimes you'll often start with the premise and then look at the works and you sort of build from there. And one of the things that we found ourselves in is having more of like symposia over like Zoom, talking about what is this thing going to be. We know all the parts. And, you know, I started to just sort of like suggest some of the things that I was going through. And it was also nice to feel like it was okay for me to critique the institution in order for me to like understand how I can best help, you know? So like, it wasn't just a critique for critique's sake. It was like a critique. So like, say, this collection has a lot of portraits of white men, you know? But like, also like, I look at some of these frames and then I look at the vases and I'm like, this shit's cool. You know, I'm sorry, this is really cool. You know, like I get excited.
That's the decorative arts part.
Yeah, but also just like, I love looking at things that were painted 200 years ago by somebody who doesn't live anymore. And, you know, thinking about like what it was like, what the world was like when that person was painting that thing. I mean, it's in front of you inches. And I just, regardless of my makeup or my background, I'm instinctually like excited about that. And, you know, that is one of the things that I really wanted to talk about here, is that like, just like me being a potter might be, or somebody that looks like me being a potter might not be instinctually what somebody thinks of when they see me, or how they might assess me. Also, the things that I like, you know, who I am as a maker isn't necessarily what I love as a viewer or as an art admirer, which kind of brings me to the sort of dissonance of me being a graffiti artist, and then also being a potter. You know, those two things might seem wholly apart, but in reality, they strengthen one another, which is really what I'm trying to say about like the beauty of diversity. Is that like sometimes when you have opposing things next to one another, they can actually bring value and harmony to each other.
Yeah, I've often said that talking to a lot of ceramic artists, particularly people who make both sculptural work and functional work, you can see how the two sets of problem solving necessary, and functional, it has to be functional, someone has to be able to use it. And then you get the opportunity to kind of leave some of those problems behind and then look at something sculptural and solve different problems. I feel like you are doing that same thing with graffiti and pottery. Like you said, like you can go back to the flat when you're on graffiti and you're, thinking about layering in a different way because there's a lot of layers, but it's all two-dimensional. And then you get to kind of bring it back to the round. I don't know if this is too obvious a question to ask, but can you talk a little bit about the fact, like you're saying, you started out in Philly doing graffiti. That was a way to express yourself. You've been working on pottery for a long time. What was it like to come into the University of Pennsylvania and just start spray painting the walls?
Yeah, first thing is it was fun.
Good.
I
That's
kind
good
of
to hear.
I kind of feel like the more, the more my career moves forward and I get opportunities to like do something wild, I think that's exactly what I do. But it also kind of felt like, when you're a little kid and you dream of like what you want your house to think, and you're like, oh, I'll have a slide that leaves out my bedroom that goes into a pool.
Yep.
And this is kind of like that for an artist. You're like, oh, if I could, I'd just graffiti the walls, and and we got to do that. But what was great was the whole time people were coming down here checking out what we're doing next. And the other thing is, I kind of feel like the approach to painting is very reminiscent of how I approach ceramics. Like I'm not very, some of the things that I make might look like I'm being really careful, but like there's not too much of a concern about like what I'm covering up. It's sort of just like, it's part of the process. And actually, like sometimes when I cover the thing up, it gives it more meaning, and so the layering that happens here, I think, is like really exciting. I mean, we can never truly replicate an exterior like wall that has just like dozens of paintings on it, but like there's these little moments that I find that like in a sort of scholarly discourse, when we're talking about, for example, painting, I would think of someone like an Alex Katz. And you look at this painting that he continues to break down and break down and break down until it's just these like 3 patches of color. And I'm like, I know what that's like. That's like when I like look at an exterior wall and I can see this one section that has the bottom of a skull and it's like bright blue, and then this bright yellow right next to it. And I'm like, I love that little chunk, and so there's these like my versions of it, you know what I mean? And so, and I think also to be also honest, like there's a function to the walls being painted, like in deciding to curate the space, there was this thing where it's like, well, what do we put on the walls, and like how are those things significant, and how do they really connect? We really wanted to like figure out a way to make this to have a really, for lack of a better word, an authentic relationship between, what was happening in the walls and what was happening in the 3-dimensional area. And sometimes I kind of feel like if I look at something and if I say, okay, this is the meaning, this is why this fits, rather than like creating the fit. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the challenges, is because this show is like curated by me partially, but it's not really a curation. It's like I'm curating, but I'm also creating. Yeah. So it's almost like I see a gap and then I'm filling it with my own stuff, mm-hmm. which as an artist can kind of feel self-serving. But it's also the reality of all the different types of challenges you face working in the arts. Mm-hmm. Like figuring out how to get a bunch of different artists work here from all over the country, and like figure out how everybody's thinking, when I'm just like, well, I'm also a graffiti artist, potter. I can also just fill this myself. Yeah. And really get the point across, which is, not necessarily trying to do it to get everybody's approval, or acceptance in that. Like, I think in the community, for example, if you curate a show and you also put your stuff in it, it can also be seen in poor taste. But there's a lot of rules and they're kind of meant for you to break and challenge,
Yeah.
you know? So if you don't see what you want, you make it.
And is that where, so you're God in the God complex?
No. Okay, so to answer your question, now I remember your question. We were in the middle of a conversation. We were talking about a lot of paintings of white men painted by white men, and then put together in this, you know, way, but like it's just like white dudes across the board. I think it was Lynn who was like, yeah, there's kind of like a God complex happening here. And I was like, that's the title for the show. I was like, that it doesn't get any better for that, because it's like it's like kind of like punch you in the face, which is I think what a lot of people feel, you know? And so the thing that I love about it is like there's this like there's these moments of familiarity when you walk into this space. I think I don't know if this is the right term, but the curtains match the sofas in that space. You know what I mean? And the architecture of the building. They're still like really profound objects, but then when you walk in, this space kind of like
blows that space out of the water?
No, I wouldn't say that. But I would say that like it creates a conversation, I think is really what I'm into. Not like a competition, because like honestly, there's a lot of things that are there that I don't think I could do if I practiced the rest of my life, because I wouldn't want to, you know, but that I really admire. Like I really admire really well made oil painting, or, you know, some of these pots are just like mind blowing. And then at the same time, I'm like, well, this is what I can do. And so one of the things that I'm really excited about is if people walk into this space and see a lot of things that are like maybe unimpressive in a way, like just writing your name, like writing, you know, whatever, right? You can see yourself doing that. So then what happens is it creates a separation between what you think, like you think maybe you're not capable of being an artist, you know, or you think that to be an artist, you have to, you know, but like in reality, you know, I almost feel like one of the things that's really important about my work is talking about the accessibility of being an artist, and that like we all have something to offer to that. And so for me, one of the things that I highlight and that I'm actually really proud of is that I'm not really an expert in any particular thing. I'm good and I'm getting better at a lot of things, but it really gets the combination of things that I am mediocre at or decent at that makes me unique. It's not the thing that I'm really great at, you know, which makes it actually more accessible.
I love that. And I think it's a really healthy way to look at all of ourselves. I'm smiling because I often have said that about myself.
Yeah.
I don't particularly think I'm super excellent at anything, but I know kind of how to do a lot of stuff.
Right.
It makes me happy. It makes me be able to enjoy a lot of different aspects of life. And yeah, I love the idea of walking in and thinking like, okay, I can access this in a way. And it adds to this different Philadelphia. So this is one Philadelphia in this back room. People at home can't necessarily tell what that room is. It doesn't have graffiti. It's got kind of serene blue walls. It has portraits of Benjamin Franklin and George Washington and other white dudes.
And they actually color matched Independence Hall.
Oh,
the interior,
Nice.
yeah. So shout out to, you know,
Lynn and everybody.
Yeah. Shout out to the curators here for really making that work. But yeah.
That's great. Well, and then, I will also mention there is an amazing Minton pot over there that was at the 1876 centennial, one of my faves. And then the other pot is a Egyptian pot, maybe. No, I'm getting it wrong. Middle Eastern with amazing decoration on it. Turkish. Thank you.
Turkish. Love it.
And then you walk in here and it's red and there's graffiti and you're just like in a totally
And it's here when you
mood.
walk in, and there's is it a lithograph of William Penn?
Yeah.
Lithograph of William Penn as you come in, right next to one of the paintings of mine as you come in. Yeah.
So do you have a favorite? So you chose all of the works that we see. So there's works in this gallery that Roberto made, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But do you have a favorite or
Out of these?
Yeah, the ones you picked.
Probably the Abe Lincoln. I mean, the Prometheus vase is an obvious, but if I had to pick a painting or a drawing or 2D work, it'd be the Abe Lincoln. I just love that dude. He's just like really iconic. And I don't know. I just think like there's so much serious conversation, rightfully so, about you know, the life and times of Abe Lincoln. But I also just think, you know, he's just a character, you know, and I love seeing that character. So and also there's like I think there's, whenever there's moments of familiarity for anybody, it's a moment where you kind of feel like I belong here, or like, okay, I'm gonna get this, you know. Like it's kind of like that's like the Tuesday version of the crossword puzzle, you know what I mean? Like you're like, okay, I get
I'm
these
still
first
on
clues.
Monday, Rob. I don't know.
I'm up to like Thursdays now.
What?
Yeah, I got a friend,
Oh.
Erica. We got to talk.
I gotta catch up.
But just quickly, one of the things I guess, like one of the things I wanted to say is, especially working in the dialogue that I work in, things that I don't want to represent is I don't want to represent that like the way that I'm working or talking about this is like is the only way, or that other people that are more aggressive or direct with the way that they talk or the things that they're saying are less important. I've just found that one of the things, as they mentioned earlier, when I think of myself as a social activist, is I look at the things that I have to offer, you know, and so like one of those things is like empathy, for example. And for me, one of the things I think of is like the fact that like I don't mind being a translator or a bridge sometimes, you know, and not everybody has the time to do that, and not everybody would want to do that, you know, and so like that's one of my roles and my functions. And so one of the things I think about, especially for people starting off or thinking about how they could interact with art, is that we all do it different ways. And just because you admire the way somebody else does it doesn't mean that's necessarily the role for you. And so, you know, I almost feel like in some ways this show can be aggressive visually, but it's also really gentle, you know, because it's more of a celebration than it is like a finger pointing. You know, it's kind of like this thing exists in the same city that this thing exists in. And I want to make sure that you, like not all, but some of the Black women that have come from this place, some of the figures that have influenced me, you know, and created the opportunities that I did in the same context that we're doing it over here, you know. And right now, my particular role, even though the title is God Complex, is not necessarily to like sit here and just like complain about those things, even though I feel like that's valid for people to do. I just feel like at the point where I'm at and having this opportunity, it's just like I really wanted an opportunity to be me, which was to like look at these things and get excited about them, but then also be like, wouldn't it be interesting if like, you know, we had like a Harriet Tubman pot in the same place as a George Washington portrait, you know?
It levels the playing field.
Yeah.
And it makes these things equal in importance.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And like you said, the familiarity of looking at, even if you don't recognize most of the people in that room.
I don't.
I don't. There's a few who no one would, I don't think, except their moms. But you see Abraham Lincoln and you feel kind of like, oh, okay. You feel more comfortable. It's what you were saying. And then I think you come in here and you feel comfortable again because, well, people from Philly, where this is it. This is what our city looks like. And every time I look at graffiti on the street, I just think about the people who are expressing themselves. And it's joyful and it deserves to be in the same place with those paintings.
Yeah, and one really interesting thing is, and one thing that I really wanted to get across here was, you know, I grew up in Kensington and Philly, and, you know, especially the Mural program in Philadelphia, I was as familiar with Harriet Tubman, I think, as most people are like become familiar in grade school with the George Washington, you know. And so when I started to paint Harriet Tubman, people were, you know, some people would actually ask me like, who's that? You know, like not know. And then I realized that that's a function of my work, is to, you know, ensure that those people's faces give me space. Because even though you know, she's famous to me and iconic to me. She might not be to others.
And that's a function of the Mural Art Program today
Yes.
in Philadelphia.
Shout out to Mural Arts.
That's right. Good stuff coming up.
And the Clay Studio.
Yeah. Well, speaking of your pots, we haven't really talked too much about that. Do you want to tell us who's on this?
Yeah, well, I hope maybe he's watching. I don't know. This is my dad. And then on the other side of this pot is Ben Franklin. And for those of you who are familiar with Philadelphia, you'll notice that some of the architecture here is from the bridge, the sort of architecture of the bridge, the Ben Franklin Bridge, which my father used to ride his bike over to get to work. And then what's interesting is recently I had a piece, they did some promotion with the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and it was there was a big banner over the Betsy Ross Bridge, like one of those things. And I was like, look, Dad, it's like a bridge, like you used to go over to work. And it's just really sweet to see their, you know, because I think my parents.
Wait, do you mean the billboard that had your work on it?
Yes, a billboard that had
so
my work.
everybody knows there's a billboard with Rob's work on it.
Yeah. And so it's really strange because like my parents have really low expectations out of my life because of where I grew up. Like most people that grew up where I do, they're like the boys in my family, we're only really expected to go through middle school. Like high school is college in my family, like just eras and eras of that happening. And so for me to go to college, huge deal. For me not to be in jail, huge. For me not to be dead, huge deal. For me to have my art on a billboard, you know, like is really, you can't calculate like what that means to them, but I get to see it. And what's interesting is even people that are not my parents, people from Philadelphia, they're all like really proud of me, especially people where I come from that like don't even quite understand what it is that I'm doing. They just know that what I'm doing is like effectively connected to this place. It really feels like how people interact with hip hop artists or how people interact with anybody who really made it from those spaces. And that's really the biggest sense of pride that I have. Like when you talk about the Met, like that's like, I get really excited about something like that. When I get to have a show at Penn, it's like, yes, it's like, wow, that's amazing. I never thought in my life that I would have this opportunity. But the biggest thing is like when we have the opening and then my high school English teacher gets to come and she knows where I'm from, you know, and she sees this and she's like, wow.
Yeah. I was gonna say I got to be here at the opening when you got to talk to her and standing right there, and she was.
I still call her Miss Barton. She's like, you have to call me Mimi now. I was like, I can't do that. You're Miss Barton.
No. So she was here looking around. That was so exciting to see how emotional she was and how emotional you were because you were so proud to be able to show her. And I'm sorry that the folks at home can't see, but I wanted you to talk a little bit about a couple of pieces here. So Slick Rick is on the pot in the back with Obama. And we did get to eat cookies that had a picture of that pot on it, which I was pretty excited about.
Classic move. No, actually, classy move.
Classy.
Making.
Classy.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. So
I was just going to say, I put some Slick Rick on today while I was thinking of questions to ask you. Do you want to talk about what he means to you? Why did you put him on a pot? Why did you put him on the pot with Obama?
Yeah, so there's certain musicians in any genre that sort of like change the game and make people think about a genre in a different way. So I think prior to Slick Rick, I think, you know, hip hop was really seen as sort of an iteration of disco. And, you know, sort of this hybridization of repurposing music. But he started to write narratives and stories. And, you know, one of the things that happened is it started to talk about realities, you know, like, a kid, you know, getting a hold of a gun and him really being innocent, just like an innocent kid, but like being a product of where he grew up. And then being chased by the police and trying to figure out how to get out of the situation, but ultimately being killed. doing it all as a nighttime story is just really creative. But also, it was really influential to, I think, hip hop for a long time. And so, and then it has Barack Obama on the other side, which is also clearly an influential person. But one of the things that I think happens a long time is there's this distinct separation between what, it's almost as if we allow for people who are not people of color to decide who are heroes and who gets to be somebody who is of significance. But I also think that like Obama had a significant, regardless of how you feel about, you know, his political decisions, which, you know, I think one of the things is he became the first Black man to become president, you know, which then took away this idea that like you couldn't as a Black person be a president. So like at minimum, that's his contribution, even though those contributions are huge. And then I also think that someone like a Slick Rick is also influential because, you know, what that's doing is it really branched out a whole genre of people to be able to make music about and open the idea of being able to make music about, like, music doesn't have to just be like hip hop music doesn't just have to be about funk and dance. It can also be about that struggle. And then boom, all of a sudden in the 90s, you have this influx of music like gangster rap, like all these things that are really based off of narratives of people's realities. And so that's the start of that. And so one of the things that I think is really substantial about ceramics is it's used quite extensively in anthropology. And so that's how we know a lot about cultures in the past. Ceramics lasts for thousands of years. So to be able to make a decision to put a portrait of someone on a pot is actually a very traditional thing to do. And the only thing that's really, for lack of a better word, jarring about it is the fact that, you know, it's a Black person, you know, and I don't think that that should be something that's controversial, but it is, you know, and I think that in itself is a catalyst for people to think about why that's shocking.
And for conversation.
Yeah,
So-
because there's some conversations that can be had with words, but I think a lot of conversations and people, I don't want to ever change anybody, but I do want to complicate how people think and see people like me, you know? Because like, I think like there's no aha moments. There's no like church, like, you know, you wake up and you can walk now. I think it's more of a like, you know, dude kind of messed me up thinking about like that now, you know, Black guys make pottery. Like what's that about? You know? And you go home and you have enough of those seeds planted. And by the end of your life, you tend to look everybody around you differently, you know, as like, as completely capable of all these things that you didn't think that they were.
And it makes people think about and learn about that person. Well, why did this artist decide to put Slick Rick on a pot? And maybe go read about what he did and talk about just what, you know, find out that he was a pioneer in what he was doing. So it's educating. And you're absolutely right that sometimes looking at an object can be more powerful than words.
My favorite Slick Rick is la-di-da-di. We like to party. We don't cause trouble. We don't bother nobody. That's good.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the ones I was hoping we'd get a little rendition there, which actually was another thing I was thinking. Would you have so many layers in this show, but would music be a final layer? Would music playing kind of add? Do you think it would take away from people's opportunity to look?
I would think, you know what I think? I think this exhibition is more of an instrumental for people to do their own freestyle hip hop on top of, you know, because like I think one of the things that's really profound about hip hop music is when people add words to it, that sound becomes about the words. But I also think that like the sound of hip hop in itself has content. But what's interesting is I almost feel like this is the beat. And then when people come in, they get to like, you know, kind of funkify it a little bit.
And have their own mental wordplay.
Yeah.
So then we have some other amazing people on your pots. I don't know, we have a couple more minutes before we're going to take some questions. Do you want to pick one more pot to tell us who's on there?
Well, I mean, from this perspective, I see Alma Thomas and Harriet Tubman. And one of the things that's really, that's been really great for me is there's a lot of moments where people, through the act of making and me instinctually making things, people will often like mention an artist or mention a movement or mention something that I've been like riffing off of, or I've been thinking about for years, but I didn't even know where that reference comes from. I didn't even know where that things come. So believe it or not, I've been like tagging my name with a crown on it. And then when I got to undergrad, I found out that that crown comes from Basquiat. I didn't know who Basquiat was, you know, but it's like his iconography had embedded itself so deeply in the culture that I was in that many people didn't even know who he was, but were like replicating something that was significant because of him. And I think that Alma Thomas is one of those figures. And, you know, one of the great things is like I started by putting all these faces. I mean, really, the act of putting portraits on pots was really began as a protest. And, you know, being at school and feeling like regardless of what I made, it eventually turned into race. Or at least like that was my feeling from it, you know? And then feeling like I don't belong here, to then like putting my face on things, putting my face in a place that doesn't belong, to then saying like, well, I can't just put my, and I was thinking about, well, who got me here? And then through that process and actually like doing research and discovering more people. And so that's one of the things that's really exciting. I think like for me, Harriet Tubman's image and her story and like the things that she did, like I don't think in the history of the world that'll ever be beat. You know, I just feel like all the things that I wish that I could be, or the sort of like the strength and the courage and the like audacity that she had, and then also the selflessness, the sort of like constant putting herself in harm's way in order to free others, is just like, there was no Instagram, you know, it wasn't like Harriet Tubman was like freeing people and like, hey, check this out, let me get some likes. It was just like, no, actually, I want to do this and I want nobody to know about it, you know, like doing good for actual good sake. And so for me, it's really hard for me to like ever do something without that, because I almost feel like her face is like a crown for me. It's like where I start from a lot of times, you know. I almost feel like in many ways the root of the type of art that I'm trying to make starts with the Underground Railroad.
You think, what would Harriet Tubman do?
I do. That's it. Yeah, I like that. What would Harriet do?
We need some bracelets. Yeah, I mean, again, it's education, but it is giving people pause, giving them a chance to have their own moment of contemplation and think about, you know, she's doing these amazing things. What am I doing?
Yeah.
For all of us to have that
Right.
thought. So I do want to talk a little bit about how you got into ceramics. A lot of people know the story, but do you want to talk a little bit about your first foray into that?
Yeah, actually, my wife in my first pottery class. And
You got the two most important things in one.
yeah.
One
Yeah, that, you know, that's true. You know, but I think that like when I started making pottery, it really became because I was lost. Like, you know, they call young men where I'm from that don't know where they're going, they call us lost boys. That's sort of just like a quote. And I was definitely lost. But one of the things that happened was like I had this moment where I was like, I'm not making very much money, and the things that I want are things that like I could get doing this. And then I looked at and said, everybody who I know who's doing this is locked up. And it was like, I got to figure out another way. I got to figure out another life. And the only thing I could think of was moving away. So I moved away to Florida, and my cousin was taking a community college class, and the time was $210 for a class. And I was like, I didn't want to go for anything where people would know that I didn't really know how to write. Like, I didn't really know how to put together a paper or cite something or whatever it is that you had to do in college. So I was like, I want to meet people my age. So let me go and take an art class, and that'll be my introduction. And the teacher just so happened to be a potter. And I fell in love with that because the pottery studio was where everybody always was. It was like they needed the equipment, they needed the facilities. But then when I started making pots, it really felt like physical labor, and I was really accustomed to that. And it was also like one of the first places, and I have to say the first place where I really got encouragement. And people were like, yo, you're good at this, And so I think a lot of times when people come from a place of struggle, if you give them any opportunity, they really put everything into it. And I mean, there's a lot of things that I definitely like earned, but there's also a lot of like people along the way who saw the potential in me and really like supported that. And so a lot of times when I'm doing stuff and, I see like my name somewhere, I don't really think it's Roberto Lugo. I almost think it's like, oh, this is the village, that like built this person. And so like, I tend to look at those things with pride because of that.
And that's true for everybody who's honest with themselves, that we're all here with the support of others. And giving such a small thing as words of encouragement to a kid in school shouldn't be too much to ask.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of the work you do encourages that and tries to get people into a place where you can tell them they're doing something well. You bring pottery wheels out to the street and work with anyone who's going to walk by, somebody who didn't think that they could ever touch clay or probably didn't even understand that was how a ceramic thing.
Yeah, that's
made.
how pots are made, right? Yeah, and that's my favorite part. I would say like my favorite part is introducing it in whatever form, whether it's like live throwing demos or teaching or in a gallery setting for people to just walk in. Like still today, there's people who like see something as simple as like a graffiti tag on a pot and they're really confused, but also really excited simultaneously because they didn't think that those two worlds could exist. But like people, we are eclectic, like I tell people all this, this all the time. And like one of the things I do is I watch like a lot of like 90s TV, like, Roseanne and stuff and like Judge Judy. And, like I have a very like normal like existence.
You're gonna start singing the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Yeah, I would. The graffiti reminds me of that. But it's like, who you are as an artist, or like maybe something that people know you, like that's not the whole you, And so like you could be somebody who like is really into porcelain, and like really into hip hop. And it's a strange thing that you can do both of those things, but I think most of us are. Yeah. And so what's really freeing as an artist is that you can exist in both of those spaces.
And that you can teach people that they have the power to make something with their hands. That is, I think, something that's really lacking in our society. And people understand drawing on a piece of paper maybe, or coloring, but the idea that you can make something that you can use is hugely empowering. And I know that's another reason why, I don't mean to make a plug, but the Claymobile program is something that you've talked about a lot.
I love the Claymobile program. And, just a quick example of, one time I got to teach at a elementary school here in Philadelphia. And, I had the kids sculpt a figure with three things that they like about themselves, because like, I can't remember when I was little, like I remember all the times people call me fat, like every day, but like, I don't remember like a single time somebody saying, oh, you're really handsome, or I like your hair, like, and so I saw this one kid sculpting himself and it reminded me of myself, and he was sculpting a little chef. And I asked him what he was sculpting. He's like, I was like, you're sculpting a chef? He's like, yeah. And I was like, you like to cook? He's like, yeah. And what do you like to cook? He's like, I don't have a signature dish yet, And then I got to teach these fellas in Baltimore who were in a drug rehabilitation center with Baltimore Clay Works. And I had them do the same exact project. And they were sharing so many stories about like how down and out they were. And you cannot, the faces on them were just like little children sculpting again. And they really excited and like so excited that they were going to exhibit with me and like really blown away. And it just like, it's when I got back with them, it seemed like that's all they thought about all week was like getting back to sculpting again, because it was like somebody gave them power back, you know, like gave them power of their voice, and like what they said meant something. And they may have spent so many, you know, so much time in the streets asking for money and people skipping over them and them feeling like they're worthless and no one ever asked them their opinion. And so is art is about you being able to tell your story, and it's just so important.
And make yourself the way you want to be, even if it's just for that one moment. That's amazing. Well, I can't help but mention the fact that you have been on PBS NewsHour, CBS Sunday Morning lately.
This show's was on CBS Sunday Morning.
It sure was.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing. So I was just saying, from CBS Sunday Morning to University of Pennsylvania and the Play Studio Lunch and Learn. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yes.
And I got to be part of that lineup. But in all seriousness, you're about to be a major player in a show at the Metropolitan Museum of Art that opens in November. You just designed sneakers. You are doing all these amazing things. I hear that there's a pottery farm gonna be happening in the future. So what is it that you dream about for the future? What do you hope is gonna come?
Well, I really want to be, this is gonna sound wrong, but I really want to be less significant, and less reliant on me as an individual, because I feel like there are so many people, just even here in this city, that carry a lot of the same skills that I do and have a lot of the charisma and the talents that I do, but don't have those opportunities. And, you know, so for me, it's like, I want to be able to set myself up to live in peace and to be a part of a community rather than like having to lead, because it's really exhausting. But also, I also feel like there's people who have, who are more knowledgeable about a lot of the things that I talk about, you know, or have a perspective that I think can have different kinds of impact, you know, like whatever that is, you know. So I really, one of the reasons why I really want this farm is because I was thinking about like, I can't see this, but like, I think it would be exciting for a lot of artists to be able to work with me and like to have an opportunity to have a place where I'm at peace and I'm working and I can invite artists as groups to come in and work beside me and like learn the things that I'm learning at. You know, I feel like that's where I want to be. You know, I've always kind of felt like an old man. I think I'm growing into that. I even bought a Vespa, so watch out.
I saw a picture of that Vespa.
It's a pretty cool Vespa, just gonna say.
And I think we, do we have any questions to answer? Great. I was gonna ask you, what is the most satisfying thing you do? Well, I think we're gonna get the iPad with the questions on it. Okay.
Yes, the American Academy has invited me back for 2023. So I'll be there, and I got so much stuff I want to do. Last time I bought all this, like I got a kiln, I got a wheel, I got all these paints. I went to an old Italian store where guys got like the vest and the flannel and the hat, and he's, you know, he talks like this, and I bought all this, and then I had to leave 2 weeks in. So that was hard, but
that was during the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah, I started there right as Italy became the hub of COVID.
Totally.
But I get to go back, and you know, this time I really feel like I'll make the most of the time.
Yeah. And is your wheel still there? Did they save it for you?
Well, Creative Rome
Yeah.
is who I connected with, so they'll get me the hookup when I get there. Yeah,
that's good. Great. Oh.
That was about my time in Rome. Nowhere else. I cannot wait to go back, y'all. I'm really excited. If anybody wants to come visit me in Rome, I'll be at the American Academy.
I'll be there.
They make really, really good food. They cook for us twice a day in an old palace And they have chefs that come to learn how to make Italian cooking. So every day they're practicing their meals. So like you'll go in, it's like today for one of our salads is fried duck breast on a grapefruit that we grew out back with fresh figs. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So,
amazing.
Yeah, should do that if you can.
Oh,
Absolutely. So, you know, one of
I'm
the
going to repeat the question just
Yeah.
quickly about the life of these works of art after the show is over. And we hear there's a generous gift in the work.
Yes, this piece right here, Bridges with my father and Ben Franklin, has been donated to the permanent collection here at the Penn Museum. And also there's a portrait out front sorry, my mind's drawing a blank. So there's two pieces that will stay with the collection permanently. Some of the works, I'm not exactly sure where they're gonna go, because, you know, honestly, like I made them for this space, you know what I mean? So like they exist here now, but you know, that's also one of the things I really get excited about is like, where's this thing gonna find itself next?
And the idea that they were made for the space, not just the pots, but the bases, you were able to use capitals from columns from a church.
Yeah, it's a historically Black church in Philadelphia. I believe it's called the Church on Norris. I'd have to look it up, but it's somewhere in our documents. But so these pieces were on a church, I believe, for about 75 years. And they were kept by Beatty American Architectural Salvage. And I was able to work with him and borrow them and build these columns for the works in here.
Yeah, it's very special, specifically for this.
Yeah,
piece.
I like them.
Yeah.
Anytime, any chance to spray paint something gold,
They're
I'm about.
gold. Great. Any other questions?
Our studio audience is shy.
What?
Our studio audience is shy.
Oh, they are shy. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite piece? Please say something in the other room.
No.
Yeah, I really like the Ben Franklin you did. Okay, yeah.
But yeah, it's all been like so cool. And also just seeing the blue horizon
Uh-huh.
as well. Like growing up in Philly, I always loved. I went to one boxing match there for clothes.
Uh-huh.
So like there's just such a confluence of great Philadelphia energy, grit, power in this. So
Yeah.
it's great.
Well, and let's mention those photos because we haven't talked about them yet. We were
Yeah.
talking a lot about the paintings. You want to talk a little about the three photos of the boxing?
To be honest, I would have to probably
Bow to Lynn.
bow to Lynn. These are part of the permanent collection at the Penn Museum. And I think it's also just a quick plug. You know, this is a collection. I think this is true for a lot of things. It's like there's places in the world when you don't see something reflected in the way that you want, like make the effort to have that thing look the way that you want. And I think those pieces were donated to the collection as well, the photographs. And so, you know, I really think that this is an incredible institution, specifically working with, I keep calling them the Lynn's, Lynn Atlas and Lynn Dobie. But I really think that it takes people willing to take those risks and look at and think about, okay, we have this space. What is this artist going to think about? We don't know what this artist is going to think about this, but let's do it anyway. Let's work head on and let's work with them. I think it's like the type of thing that I say, I think we're so accustomed to seeing immediate response. Like we're in this YouTube, Instagram culture where you see something, you get likes and people respond to it or make an iteration of it. But we don't realize that the things that we're doing now, we're not really going to take effect for another 20 years. You know, so it's like the work that y'all are doing now, I feel like, you know, maybe the shows 20 years from now are gonna like, we're gonna see 2 or 3 of these a year, you know, because of the things we're doing now. So point being is like, you know, we can criticize collections and all those things, we can also add to them. We can also make our voice heard.
And to me, that circles right back to the title God complex, because you're creating the world that you want to see.
Yeah.
You're creating the world that you want to live in, and all of us have a responsibility to do that. So whether it's curating a show or making one piece of art or encouraging a child, these are all little ways that we can all make the world the way we want it to be.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to show everybody this amazing graphic rendition of Rob's life.
Do people get one of these when they come and visit the show? Y'all, this is worth, I mean, yeah, the artwork's great and everything, but you get a piece of art when you come here.
It's amazing.
This is my story in comic book form, drawn by Chop, Griff Jurchak, and it's basically a narrative of me coming from Philadelphia and making work and eventually being in a museum. And so it's a wonderful story. And then the brochure itself is, you know, my writing. It also clarifies the objects in here. It's a really incredible. I love this piece. So you should come get it.
The only little edit I would make, I told Rob, this is Roberto speaking at Ensica to 5,000 potters, and every single person in the room was crying, and there are no tears on their little faces. So we just need to make that one edit. But thank you so much, Rob.
I'm good at making people cry. Just ask my wife. She's like, every time you open your mouth, it's
in a good way.
Right.
It makes us feel. That's what art is supposed to do.
Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Roberto.
And
I
thank
really
you,
enjoyed talking to you.
Jay-Z.
Thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Sarah. Thank you, Penn. We appreciate it.
Thank you all for joining us, and thank you to Roberto and Jen for a really wonderful and warm-hearted conversation. So for those of you who have not yet come to the exhibition, I want to remind you God Complex is on view 6 days a week here at the Arthur Ross Gallery at the University of Pennsylvania, and it will be on view until December 19th. We have a whole series of programs. Next week on Thursday, we will have a poetry reading moderated by Levi Bentley, and I encourage you to tune in again or to come actually to the gallery to register and to come for that program. Thanks so much for joining us this evening, and thank you both.